I'm Anthony Kay, and this is Sports Fluent. Welcome to episode 31 of Sports Fluent. This week, we're talking WNBA with former player Val Whiting. We're going to talk about the NFL and Patrick Mahomes' new contract with the Kansas City Chiefs. There's some good news from the NHL, and I'll be giving you my NBA predictions so that you can be the smartest person in the playoff pool this year. And lastly, in the fix, we're going to fix Major League Baseball and their problem with COVID-19. We're starting this week's episode off with my interview with Val Whiting. Val started in a small school. It was 52 students, all girls, in Delaware. How did she go from there to playing at Stanford and being an NCAA two-time national champion, the leader in rebounding and scoring for all Pac-12 at the time of her graduation, to playing in the WNBA? We'll let her walk you through that story and tell you what she's doing now. Summer camp basketball for life skills, teaching kids how to be better on and off the court. It's an inspirational story that I think you should hear. So here it is. Val, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Anthony?
I'm doing well. So for those of us or listeners out there that don't know, Val is a very accomplished basketball player from Stanford University. And you started your high school career in a fairly small high school in Delaware. Tell me how you end up from a small Delaware school to Stanford.
Well, I think it all started my freshman year in high school. First of all, I didn't start playing basketball until seventh grade. I wanted to be a cheerleader. Then I got cut from cheerleading, and my math teacher said, "Hey, you're tall, come off the basketball." So that's how I got started. So I really wasn't even into basketball that much. It was just, I was confused. I used to even shoot at the wrong basket at halftime, after halftime was over. But my dad, who was, he's an awesome man, loved to put me outside of my comfort zone and didn't mind seeing me fail, which I can't stand watching my kids fail, but somehow he had no problem with it. And we went to a USA basketball trial at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. And like, I'm 13, 14, just starting to play basketball, but I am my height, I'm 6'3". So we had me playing against these legends in basketball. They're all college players, Division I. There was one high school player, but she was ranked that she was a top high school player in the country. And I got my butt kicked.
Now, I'm going to jump in and say, for those that don't know, back then, you just you just had to pay a fee and you could try out for the national team. Yes,
you try out and they give you a jersey and jersey number 133 or some big number. And and you put through drills I've never seen before. Like I've done the 3-man weave, never the 5-man weave, stuff like that. And playing man-to-man defense against these experienced players and just being totally confused. And people were pretty nice, to be honest. No one got frustrated with me. But I got cut, and I was looking at the list. They put your number on there. If your number is on the list, then you made it to the next round. But my number wasn't on the list, and I started crying. And apparently, the Stanford coach, Tara Vanderveer, who's still there, saw me crying and took note, I guess, of because I was being competitive. And then she later told me she noticed how well I backpedaled down the court. So, which is crazy, because you would think a coach will come see someone play. They're noticing all the baskets they're making, all the assists. She noticed backpedaling in my competitive spirit. So that's how I got on a quasi radar for Stanford.
Okay. So now you go back to your school in Delaware, and you told me it was an all-girl school?
Yes.
With 50 students?
In my class.
Yeah. That's typical what, a school like Stanford looks for.
There's no way they would have found me in that. And Delaware's a small state.
For sure. So luckily you were good at backpedaling.
And more importantly, competitive, which is something I think all coaches look for. So you go through high school. I'm assuming you improve?
I improved. We won 4 championships, state championships, and I was a 2-time All-American. So I hit my stride, kind of similar to your story. I went to camp. Back then, you can go to basketball camp, and coaches would come to the camp.
Yep.
Instead of AAU, it wasn't really that big. And I went to Kathy Rush basketball camp, and she was the coach of Immaculata, historical program as well in Pennsylvania. And I got my first college letter from Princeton University.
Nice.
And I was like, oh my goodness, I can play basketball in college. And from then on, I just totally motivated me, and I just took off.
Okay, so then obviously you end up going to Stanford. I've kind of given that one away. And at Stanford, you do pretty good, right? Nothing to really write home about, but maybe share a little bit.
Sure. It was a blessing for sure. So at Stanford, I was a part of 2 national championship teams, 4 Pac-10 championship teams. I was freshman of the year, national freshman of the year, also Pac-10 freshman of the year, and then a 2-time Pac-10 player of the year, and also 3 Final Fours. Then I graduated Stanford as the all-time leading scorer and rebounder in Pac-10 history.
Now, that's incredible. Obviously, I underplayed it a little bit. So you have an amazing college career. You know, the national titles, the is just. I dreamed as a kid of playing in the NCAA tournament, and to win a national title is just phenomenal. And you got 2 of them. So congratulations, obviously phenomenal. But in those days, after college, not many options, right, for female basketball players. What do you do after that?
You go overseas to play. And then the league that everybody wanted to play in was Japan. They were paying the most money, but I went to Italy instead, and then Israel, and then Brazil. And then after that, basketball came here with the American Basketball League, the ABL, in '96.
Okay. Now, in between there, is there a national team tryout?
Yes. After.
That was 95, was it? Am I correct?
Yes, 95.
Okay.
I tried out for the 95 national team. Was supposed to train all year long until the 96 Olympics. They got paid. It was the first time they were paying them. And it was mostly professional athletes like Teresa Edwards, who's the best player in the world and nobody knows about. So I was on another national team trial. I had made the Pan American Games team for that year, but the games got canceled. I think they didn't have enough basketball teams or something. And so someone, actually, Dawn Staley, pulled me aside and said, if you, the Olympic Committee said, if you come in shape to the national team trial, you'll be on the team. So, okay, cool. I can do that. And also, my college coach was also was a part of the team. She was a head coach of the team. So
things are looking pretty good.
Yeah, things are looking pretty good. I came in phenomenal shape. I had an amazing tryout. I remember the day it happened too. So when you go to Olympic Training Center, you stay in the dorms. It's like a dorm room and cafeteria. All the athletes eat together. The wrestlers there and track athletes. So I remember going back to the dorm, and it was the time for me to know. I think it was the last 18 of us, but the team was going to be 12. So I remember sitting in my dorm and knock on the door, and the coach comes and gets me and brings me to the room, and it's the Olympic Committee sitting around, and I sit down at a table, and I don't know how many. I remember the faces. I just don't remember who was there. Oh, I know one person I can remember, Tracy Williams, and they said, Val, you were not selected, and I just started crying. But good luck in medical school. So
obviously bad news, but I guess we should mention at that point you had been accepted into medical school.
Yes.
So, that's a good thing, but obviously the goal, the passion, right, was to play basketball.
It wa- it was. It was.
And
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, you go right ahead.
Well, I was going to say the reason why I took it so hard is that I felt betrayed. I guess maybe I was naive, thinking people would stick to their word, and that jaded me a little bit, which I lost my innocence. How can you lose your
Right.
innocence at
Yeah.
22? But I feel like I
Yeah.
lost my innocence of how I looked at the sport, because the sport is, if you're good, you get rewarded for it.
Right.
If you're bad, you don't. So that jaded me a lot.
And so at that point, obviously, I don't want to say you don't take it that well, right? And is this your first bout, you feel, maybe of depression, or
Yes, that
what
was my
happens
first.
next?
I remember going home, walking the house, and like everybody's crying. Like, well, my dad wasn't crying, but my mom was crying, my grandmother was crying, my sister was crying, because I think they knew how much I wanted it.
Right.
And how hard I trained for it, because I had gotten a nutritionist and a personal trainer, and I went to Stanford, the Bay Area, just to train for it, and lived with a family of alumni at Stanford, a professor. So I was really into it. So they cried, and I went into depression, and I had to go on medication for my depression. And I finally got out of it and with therapy, and ended up going to Brazil after that.
Okay. And so obviously now you're playing in Brazil. How long are you in Brazil for?
6 to 7 months.
Okay. And then when you come back, I'm assuming you come back to the US.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like? Do you go back into medical school, or what brings you back to the US?
I came back, and the ABL, the American Basketball League, had decided they were forming teams. I don't remember how financially, in terms of which teams were where and how they got
Right.
funded, but they were piggybacking off of the success of the '96 Olympic teams. The Olympics were in Atlanta, and they got huge support and
Right.
celebrity status. And so the ABL, American Basketball League, starts, and I'm supposed to play for San Jose Lasers. I signed a contract, and they were paying better than the WNBA wasn't a thing yet. They were paying six figures. WNBA just got to six figures not too long ago for their
Right.
players. My contract was $425,000, and I came back from Brazil, and then later that summer got into a car accident where I was in an SUV. We're driving on 95. I was coming back, I think, from playing basketball. I was a passenger, and my SUV flipped over on the highway. I don't even remember why. And I ended up cutting my knee down to the patella tendon. And the doctor was like, well, you'll be lucky just to walk right again, let alone play basketball again. So I was like, oh, I just signed a contract.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was that I should have been dead, first of all. Forget playing basketball again. I should have died. I mean, and my seatbelt that I was wearing normally doesn't work. Normally doesn't click in, but it actually stayed in. And because I should have been thrown from the car if my seatbelt.
Right, if it had unclicked.
Yes.
Wow. Just the series of events that that brings you to that point. So now your passion, right? What you consider to be your life, although you survived the car accident, what was your life, at least as basketball, is over. Mm-hmm. What happens at that point over the next few years? Like, how do you recover from that? What do you do?
Basketball wasn't over.
Oh.
They thought it was over. I put my leg in a immobilizer. They put me in an immobilizer for 10 days while I healed. But they stitched me up. I forget how many stitches I had. Took gravel out of my knee and everything, and my leg shrunk. And then from there, I found one of the top physical therapists in Delaware, but also nationally, and rehabbed with her. And I came back and ended up making an all-star team that year.
You played that season?
I did. I played that season.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
So obviously good year. So you're an all-star that year. You've got me literally on the edge of my seat. So
I'm sorry,
what happens next?
you,
No, it's fantastic. No, I love it. It's fantastic. So that how many seasons then do you play, or how many seasons is the American Basketball Association even around?
The ABL lasted just 2.5 years.
Yeah.
We couldn't compete with the marketing power of the NBA because the WNBA started the summer of '97, and commercials and ESPN wasn't putting our highlights on, but they were putting their highlights on. And we folded, and actually a lot of us didn't know it folded because I was coming home for Christmas break, sitting in my parents' home, and I got a phone call from the News Journal, which is the paper for Delaware, and hey, Val, I think Kevin Tresolini, I want to get your thoughts on the ABL folding. I was like, what? Okay, I'll call you back. So that's how I found out. The ABL folded.
That's the worst. Find out from somebody else wanting to question you about it. Now at this point, I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I do want to get into the work that you've done, and obviously the summer camps that you're doing now, because I think they're very important. So let's maybe fast forward a little bit. Your playing days are over, and I want to talk about. So you end up getting you win an award, the WNBA Cares Community Assist Award. What were you doing at that point where now the WNBA recognizes you and gives you that award?
I had a summer league / life skills program for teenage girls. They were in high school. So in order for them to play the games, they'd had to go through these classes and learn. And so it was like basketball was the carrot, and I got an award for that program.
And at the time, no affiliation, obviously, with the WNBA. Are you a fan? Are you paying attention to what's going on in the WNBA?
Yeah, because when that league folded, all of the ABL players wanted to go to the WNBA, and
makes sense. They want to stay. They want to stay in the U.S. versus having to go play overseas, right? Yeah.
And one thing people don't know is that the collective bargaining agreement was up for renewal that year, and the players put in the CBA that only 2 ABL players per team. So a lot of ladies that play in the ABL couldn't play in the WNBA because of that rule. And the ABL at that time was the stronger league. The best players started in the ABL. Dawn Staley started in the ABL. Teresa Edwards is a Hall of Famer, started in ABL. I mean, I think Dawn is a Hall of Famer too. But those are players in the ABL.
Right.
And Katie Smith, she's a Hall of Fame. She's a coach for the New York Liberty. People don't talk about the ABL anymore at all. They only make it seem like the WNBA was it, and that's good marketing. But so that was a big thing. A lot of great players didn't get jobs because of that restriction, because we would have taken the jobs of the WNBA players. So that's how strong the players were in the ABL.
Right. Yeah, and as a WNBA player, you want to protect your jobs. It makes sense from there. It's it's not great for the ABL players, but it makes sense from the WNBA PA, that's what they're called.
Yeah.
To put that provision into the CBA.
Yes,
that makes sense. Yeah. So I'm going to take another jump forward. So now you're doing basketball summer camps that teach life skills, and I think that's really important because obviously we talk a lot about sports, but one of the things that I know growing up playing sports and that I, try to instill in my kids, and I used to teach basketball summer camps as well, is a lot of the stuff that you learn playing sports, doing athletics, do help you in life. So the fact that you've kind of brought those two things together, I think is fantastic. Tell me a little bit. So you're based in just outside of, I guess, Seattle.
Yes.
And you're doing these camps now. Obviously, with COVID, they've gone a little virtual. Tell me
Yes.
a little bit about what you're doing there.
Well, I'm actually definitely getting out of my comfort zone being on camera because I'm an introvert and I shy away from that kind of stuff. But when I taught my first Zoom class or clinic, it was amazing to me, just feeling connected to the kids. So I have coming up, my camps are 2-week sessions. So it's like July 6th to the 17th, and it's just 45 minutes. And we do anything from team challenges, individual challenges, just using Zoom. But the main thing it's not just skills to me, because a lot of kids are afraid to fail. They are afraid to make mistakes. And the rule I always tell them before we start anything, of course you're gonna have fun. You wanna have fun, you gotta take risks, and you gotta make mistakes.
Yeah.
So that's what I always tell them, and I always promote: make mistakes. Go fast enough that you're making a mistake, just to get them used to constantly pushing themselves to their limits.
I know it sounds very cliche, but I always I tell, whether it's my kids or anyone who I have a conversation with, failure is just a step towards success, because you can't visualize, you can't get successful. You can't ask anyone who's successful and they'll tell you of their 100 failures beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a great lesson for kids to learn, because if all they ever do is succeed, I don't think they appreciate those successes as much. So I'm going to, again, another sidebar here. So WNBA, are you following it? Do you think it's coming back anytime soon? Obviously COVID has thrown this huge wrench in, I think, everyone's plans, for sports and life in general. But are you following what's going on?
I know they're going to be playing their games at the IMG Academy in Florida. I think it's in Orlando. And then it is Orlando. And then it's going to be in July. I want to say the 22nd, but then I think that's the NBA.
No, I think the NBA was supposed to be the 31st, and they may have moved it to the 30th.
Okay.
The dates keep changing on me. That even the draft was October 15th, and I think now they moved that as well. So I think it's very fluid right now for all sports.
Okay.
Do you follow it as a general, just love of women's basketball, or just basketball in general? I shouldn't say women's, because it's just I was telling you earlier, I think it's great fundamental basketball that everyone should watch if you're a fan of basketball, period. But do you follow it just as hey, I enjoy the WNBA, or do you have a rooting interest? Is there a team that you follow? Any kind of players that you're kind of very excited to see back on the court?
Well, my favorite player is Elena Deladon, and it's mainly because I'm friends with her family. She's from Delaware. We went to the same high school. She went to Ursuline Academy just like I did. And I just know her journey and her story, and I know how hard she worked, because I saw her when she was 8 years old, working harder than any high schooler.
Right.
So she's my favorite player, and that's who I always am happy when I see her killing it out there. And her story was, she got burnt out from basketball, went up to UConn, and didn't even last a whole week. Left that same day, I think. Came back, quit basketball, went to University of Delaware, played volleyball. I think she made all conference for them, and then switched back to basketball and set all these kind of records and stuff. And the rest is history. But the thing I like about her is that a lot of parents, a lot of people think you have to take the exact same path that someone else does to be successful. And that's not how life works. That's not how God works. I'm religious, so I just feel we all have our own journey. My journey is not going to be like your journey, Anthony, and Elena's is not going to be like the average number one recruit in the country's journey. And you still can end up on top,
right.
even
Now,
zigzagging.
Well, speaking of journeys, so we touched a little bit on the kind of the when you got cut from the national team and having about a depression. And I just wanted to, I guess, end it with, so that wasn't the only time, right, that you dealt with that. Do you mind sharing for us kind of what happened later on, and more importantly, right? Because I think it shows your strength, but also I think it's an important story to tell, kind of what happened and how you got through it.
Sure. And I forgot to tell you this when we were speaking earlier, and I'm sorry. So I actually played my entire WNBA career with undiagnosed bipolar depression.
Mm-hmm.
99 was my first season in the WNBA after coming from the ABL.
Yeah.
And I was on and off the injured reserve list because I was too depressed to play or practice. And I remember being on the bench and the assistant coach looked down at me to come in, and I would shake my head, no, I don't want to go in. And then the next season, I ended up taking all of the 2000 season off because of depression. And then I came back 2001, 2002, really not healed, didn't really do the work. With therapy, it's just not medication. You got to really do the work.
Right.
And finished playing in 2002. I actually had a baby too. I had a baby in 2001.
Yeah, don't forget that minor thing. Yeah.
Yeah. He's 19 now. So yeah, that was my first major in terms of like the sport that I loved that brought me joy was actually making me miserable.
Right.
Which is kind of ironic. You wouldn't think basketball can do that to you, but it did, because I was very hard on myself, very analytical, just an overthinker, and just got lost in my thoughts. And then I thought I was over everything when I retired in 2002. Without, hey, basketball's gone. I'm going to feel better. And then 2011, I actually had my first psychotic break where I had to be admitted to the psych hospital for inpatient. And when you go to inpatient, it's because you are a threat to yourself and others. That's
right.
Why you go there. And I was a threat to myself. I was suicidal. And I believe that happened because I never fully took care of what I was supposed to take care of in terms of doing the work, but also a couple years before lost a baby and just kind of pushed that under and just kept moving. And then I owned a business and it was stressful and I just cracked. So that was my first hospitalization. And then I would end up coming out and then going back in 2 other times, but finally got a real diagnosis with bipolar depression and borderline personality disorder.
And it's, we don't talk about it enough. I think it's starting to become more acceptable to talk about mental
Mm-hmm.
health, but you see it in athletes, and for whatever reason, I feel like maybe because they're athletes and celebrities, you hear about it more. But it's something where, had you, to your point, had it been something that was brought to the surface that you deal with, not just with medication, like you said, putting in the work, it is something that you can live with, right? And you're proof of that after being hospitalized 3 times, you come out of it, and now I'm assuming life has changed, but you understand the steps that you need to take and the work that you need to put in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, even just talking about it, I don't feel weird. Like when in 99, I told nobody why I took that season off. No one knew.
Right.
I don't think I told anybody until quite recently. So yeah, just talking about it, and then people saying, you know what, Val, I struggle with that too. And you don't feel like you're so weird or something's terribly wrong with you. It's for me personally, it's a biochemical imbalance, and medicine and helps me stay stable. And also the other emotional stuff that's going on. I'm still in therapy. I go every week, whether I'm happy or not. It's nice to talk to somebody and have them listen and still work through stuff that may not be resolved. So I think if you're in a constant battle for personal growth, then you're not going to be afraid to talk about be vulnerable in front of people, because that's how you learn about yourself. That's how people learn from you, and that's how you keep moving forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think I think you hit the nail on the head, right? I think the days of keeping it all in and just trying to deal with it, or white knuckle it and just get through it. It's good to see that it's starting to change. I think there's a lot more education and knowledge that needs to be shared, but that's why I appreciate you coming on and sharing that story, sharing your story and your life with us, because for every person that does it, right, there's someone who's going to hear it and be like, hey, you know what, I think that's me. And if it gets one person to talk about it and at least address it, I think therapy is important for almost everybody, because in this day and age, I feel like we all have things we need to deal with. And like I said, I think the sharing part of it is that first step, right? Like you just mentioned, now you're comfortable opening up and talking about it. And when you came out about it, you were told, hey, you know what, I feel that way too, or and I think that's important, right? Because for every, and I bring up some, like, I know the one that affected me was because I'm going off on a different sport here, but I'm a big Chicago Bears fan. And when Brandon Marshall came out and said, hey, you know what, I deal with bipolar and personality disorder, and I was like, really? Like, that's my wide receiver. There's nothing wrong with it. And it's, wow, he was so open about sharing that. And I thought, that's fantastic. I think, more people come out and openly share their stories. I think it helps everybody. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just going to end it on a shameless plug for your summer camp. So if people want to join your virtual summer camp and for life skills, how can they get a hold of you? Where can they find you?
The registration page is basketballplayer.coach, but you can always email me at hey, HEY at IamCoachVal.com. I know it's a lot of confusion.
That's okay. I'll get those for you, and I'll add them into the link to the podcast. Again, Val, thank you so much for sharing. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Anthony, for having me.
I told you it was an inspirational story, and we thank Val for joining us on the show. If you haven't had a chance to watch the WNBA, please do. It is such an exciting and entertaining game. I love watching it, and I'm going to tell you, their fundamentals are probably better than most of the players you see in the NBA. Off the court, the WNBA players probably take the lead from all major sports in terms of their awareness and the stories that they have to tell, be it Pride, Black Lives Matter, Maya Moore, and her taking a year off to help an innocent man get out of jail. We're going to be bringing you those stories every single week on Sports Fluent. This week, however, let's talk about their return to play. They've recently agreed to a 22-game schedule. They're all going to be playing in Florida in a bubble, much like the NBA players. And who should you watch for? Is it the Washington Mystics, the Las Vegas Aces? They're your top two favorites, according to Vegas, to win the championship this year. However, my daughter's got her money on the dark horse, the Atlanta Dream. I'm telling you, you should keep an eye on the New York Liberty, because Sabrina Ionescu is a special player. However, if I have to put my money where my big mouth is, I'm going all in on the Los Angeles Sparks. Let me know what you think. If you had to redo the 2017 NFL Draft, regardless of what you had on your team, would Patrick Mahomes be the number one overall pick regardless? Think about it. Probably would. And the Kansas City Chiefs did the smartest thing they could do today by signing him up to a 10-year, $503 million contract. Now, There's a lot of moving pieces to that contract and ways for him and for them to get out of it. However, the big question is, well, I guess there's two. One, is he worth it? Well, let's see. He's in his mid-20s, and 10 years puts him into his mid-30s, which locks him up for the entire prime of his career. He's arguably the best, if not one of the best, quarterbacks in the NFL today. He also is the defending Super Bowl champion quarterback. So is he worth it? The short answer is, yeah, he probably is. Now, I will say this because the comments have been flooding in, so I'll say them. He's been getting a little bit critiqued, if there was, that he doesn't read defenses, but doesn't really have to because of that offense and the weapons around him. I disagree with that statement. However, it's hard to argue with statistics. Even if this is his peak, if his numbers don't increase, they're still incredible and put you in a position to contend for a Super Bowl every single year, much like every player in the NFL, barring injuries, concussions, etc. The other thing is, so let's finish that off. Is he worth it? 100% he is worth it. However, the NFL's salary cap is going to be $198 million next year. Depending on if it goes up or down, let's use that $200 million number as the baseline. This year, he is owed a little bit of money. Next year, it's about $24 million. So the big chunk of money is about $450 million for 10 years after that. That gives you about an average of $45 million a year. Let's do simple math and call it 50, which means his salary equates to about 25% of the entire team's salary cap. Will they be able to keep their current roster together or bring in other players around him to keep him successful? One of the things that we've seen out of a lot of NFL teams is when they lock up, obviously, their most important position in quarterback, that the team tends to descend because they've spent so much money on paying their franchise quarterback that they don't have enough money to build around them. It's why you've seen this kind of trend where teams on their that have quarterbacks on their rookie contracts tend to build around them, and that's their window of opportunity if they can strike gold on that young rookie quarterback, much like the Kansas City Chiefs did, much like the Baltimore Ravens are trying to do. Whereas if you don't hit on that young quarterback, let's call the Bears as an example with Mitchell Trubisky, right? It puts you in a difficult position. So, can they build the team around him? That is going to be the question for Andy Reid and his management team. But what you have today is a quarterback who's locked up, who should be happy, who is hopefully motivated for at least 2 more years of a very manageable contract. So my question is, can the Kansas City Chiefs, with one of the most talented offensive rosters in the NFL, with the best, or arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the league, do what no other NFL team has done? Win 3 straight Super Bowls. This year, obviously, is not a lock. However, they're still your favorites. And if they repeat and are able to bring back those pieces and hopefully improve their defense a little bit, can they do what has never been done before? That remains to be seen. But congratulations today to the fans of Kansas City, the franchise, Chiefs, and of course, Patrick Mahomes. It looks like there's good news out of the NHL. The players and owners have agreed on a new collective bargaining agreement. Now, they still need to vote to ratify the new agreement. However, this deal will take them through the 2026 season. What does that mean? It means that we're one step closer to getting back on the ice. Now, if we do return to hockey, what does that look like? July 13th would be the start of training camp. July 26th, the teams would travel to their 2 hub cities. And on August 1st, they would start play. But it's going to be a little bit different. As you know, they've already played around 60 games of the season. So what would that look like? 24 teams in a Stanley Cup tournament. Those games will be split between the 2 hub cities of Toronto and Edmonton. Let me say this right off the bat. I think this is going to be one of the most exciting playoff seasons the NHL has seen. And it might be something that they look at in the future because I think it is going to be great to watch. That being said, you will have some traditionalists that will say, this season needs to have an asterisk next to the Stanley Cup champion. Let me tell you right now, right here, that's a big, fat no. You play the schedule, you play the teams that are in front of you. And regardless of what happens, why it happened, pandemics, injuries, suspensions, whatever the case may be, you play the team in front of you, you play the schedule that's in front of you. So good luck to all the 24 teams in this Stanley Cup playoff. We'll do our predictions next week on the NHL, but up next, our NBA predictions. With NBA teams making their way to Florida to start the shortened 8-game remaining regular season games and then starting the NBA playoffs, it's time that we make some predictions. Obviously, you know the favorites of winning the NBA championship. Everyone's talking about the Lakers, the Bucks, and the Clippers. If I were to make a wager with you today, and I said pick one of those 3 teams or the field, who would you take? Send me your comments and let me know. And I'll tell you, I'm taking the field. The reason I'm taking the field is I believe the Lakers are susceptible for fall. Losing Avery Bradley and possibly Dwight Howard, I think hurts that team more than people realize. Yes, LeBron James and Anthony Davis are ridiculous talents. However, I don't think the team has enough weapons to get out of the West, which takes me to the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and a deep roster. However, they've struggled throughout the season getting their chemistry right, and they're not going to be in a better position now than they were 3 months ago, having not been together, played together, probably haven't seen each other, etc. So what makes you think that they could get back in the gym and within 8 games create that chemistry that you need to win a championship? They can't. The Bucks, and of the 3 teams, that's the one that I'm least confident about when I say I take the field. The Bucks have all season been one of the best teams in terms of record, but much like last year, they are very susceptible to a team that can come in and play defense against Giannis. They actually have less talent than they did last year, and the East has some teams that are deep and that are strong defensively that can knock them off. The 76ers, the Celtics, and the Raptors all have legitimate ability to knock off the Bucks in the East. In the West, the Lakers or Clippers still might make it to the final, but I think the team in the East is going to be the one that wins the championship this year. If I'm making a prediction, it's not a popular one because everyone is talking Lakers, Clippers, Bucks. I'm going with the Raptors to repeat this season. Let me know who your pick is to win this year's NBA championship. Now for the fix. I've been talking for a long time about Major League Baseball. and how they have problems that need fixing. So, this week in The Fix, we're going to talk about Major League Baseball's problem with COVID-19. It might not sound like a lot of players, 31, who have tested positive. It's only 1 and something percent of all the players in Major League Baseball, and 7 staff members. However, they're not releasing the names of the players or the teams, obviously, in which they play for. And that is the problem. With COVID-19, it is a disease or a virus that spreads through contact with other people. If you don't know who those people are, how are you going to properly protect yourself? It makes no sense not sharing the players' names or the staff members' names. For example, I'm a player on the Reds, and I know that trainer, Bob Smith, has tested positive for COVID-19. I don't think I want him or her giving me a massage, giving me treatment, working me through batting practice, whatever the case may be. I need to know that information. Now, do the teams internally know? I don't know the answer to that. However, the public has a right to know as well. So, baseball, let's fix your policy of secrecy, because this is just a microcosm of all the other issues baseball has. The unwritten rules, the tradition of the game that really needs to change, be it that pitcher A beamed my best player, so now I got to go beam their player. Sign stealing. It's something that everybody does. It just so happens that certain teams are better at it or get caught at it. These are all things that just make the average baseball fan not want to watch baseball anymore. Forget the fact that it takes forever to play a game. That's a whole nother discussion for another day. In my next week's episode, I have Greg Zahn, who's a World Series champion, talking about some of the crazy, or in his words, not smart, rule changes like a pitch clock to get pitchers pitching faster and those types of things that are just taking away from the game. The reality is, baseball's still being watched. Baseball's still making money. It's still profitable. And their baseball teams, players, and management are actually their own worst enemies. So there's a lot to fix when it comes to baseball. But if I'm just focusing on getting back to playing, share the names of the players and the staff members who have been infected with COVID-19. If the number reaches an unacceptable rate, shut down the season. A 60-game season already isn't enough to determine a true World Series champion anyways. This is strictly about money and revenue. Take a year off. Get your game in order. Get your own house in order. Get your new CBA done, for Christ's sakes. And then come back next year at spring training, everybody refreshed, with a new deal in place, with rules that make sense for everyone's protection if COVID's still a thing at that point, which I believe it will be, and go from there. I'm Anthony Kay, and you've been listening to Sports Fluent. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at sports_fluent, or email me and let me know your thoughts on the show. AnthonyK@sportsfluent.com. Until next week.